Welcome. I'm Kira Epstein. I'm the program coordinator at the New School at Commonweal, and I'm here today with Victoria Santos, a new host at the New School, to welcome you to this conversation with Satterberg Foundation's CC Gardner Gleser about reparative philanthropy. A few words about our host, our new host, Victoria Santos, because we're so pleased to have her with us. Victoria came to Commonweal when she helped to facilitate our 2017 fall gathering, and she just stayed connected to Commonweal ever since. Last year, she officially joined our staff and founded her own program, the Center for Healing and Liberation. Victoria has trained in the fields of psychology, conflict resolution, meditation, ritual, and embodied practice. And for 10 years, Victoria assisted Sabon Sommet in leading grief rituals according to the Dagara traditions of Burkina Faso. Victoria has been an incredible addition to the Commonweal community, and we're so pleased she's joined us to host our Money as Medicine series at the New School. Victoria Santos and CC Gardner Gleser, welcome to the New School at Commonweal.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kira. It is such a pleasure to be here and to have CC be part of this conversation. And I'm just delighted. I will introduce CC. I'm calling her CC at some of her friends and how she goes by, but as you mentioned before, Kara, is CC's full name is CC Gardner Gleser, and she is an advocate for social impact and social justice work. She is the first director of programs and strategic initiative at Satterberg Foundation, whose mission focused on promoting a just society in a sustainable environment. She currently serves as a leader on the board of the Andrus Family Fund, the Charlotte Martin Foundation, and Philanthropy Northwest. CC founded Black Ivy Manor, which provides funding and other opportunities for Black scholars, artists, and social justice advocates to develop their craft and their voice. CC earned her bachelor degree in African American Studies from Yale University and in M.Ed in Education Administration from Seattle University. Welcome, CC. It is such a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Victoria. Super excited to be here today.
Me too, especially after the amazing experience that you hosted for the past 2 days, which we're going to get into. But before we go there, I want to ask you, CC, on whose shoulders are you standing on?
The ancestors. Everyone that has come before me. Without them, I wouldn't be here. My mother, my grandmother, their mothers, fathers too, but the women, the force of women power, those are the shoulders I stand on.
Thank you, CC. And your name is so unique. Can you tell me a little bit about the story about your name, the Cardis?
Oh my gosh, yes. So it's Ciardis. It's the strangest name. And my mother is one of the youngest of 6. And it was her mother's best friend growing up. And her name was Ciardis, and there was a Cardis as well. So my grandmother was like, when she had her kids, oh, you all should name your kids this special name of my best friend growing up. But my mom's name was Carla. My aunt's name is Gloria. It's like everyone had all of these nice regular names. And then my uncles and aunts had children, and they named their kids regular names like Paul, Sean, Tara, and then my grandmother passed, and I was like the next grandchild born. And for whatever reason, my mom got the idea, let's use that name that no one's ever wanted to use. And we've had a million chances to use. Yes, let's use it on this baby. So that's where the name came from. And my middle name is Estelle. So imagine growing up as a little girl and your name is Ciardis Estelle.
Oh,
And Estelle was my mom's aunt. Everyone called her Coco. But so even still now, I know when I'm in trouble, or so I don't like to use C artist like professionally. I always want everyone to know that CC is C artist. But sometimes when folks call me that, I think I'm in trouble. I have some trauma. I'm like, uh-oh, what did I do?
Oh my God. Thank you for telling that story. It's interesting because this, when you say see artist, it's almost like this artist in there. It's really, it's a big name. It's a big name and you're growing into it. It's beautiful. So you're not in trouble. You're making good trouble, girl.
Thank you. I always, if I'm at an event or something and there's people I don't like or I don't want to be connected to, that's when I use C artists because I know they can't say it. They're like, wait, what is it? And it's just fun to watch folks try to figure it out.
So your name is protecting you too, huh? Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, when I was introducing your bio, in it said that you are a social impact, that you're doing social impact work, and that you're also social justice work. And when we define social justice, there's many different words that people use, but within that encompass like equal rights, equal opportunities, and equal treatment. Can you tell us a little bit more about why social justice is important to you?
Yes, I think I'm someone I'm who I am because of who I belong to, my family, my community, and without that, I wouldn't be here. So social justice to me is how do we continue to kind of move all of these gifts forward? And so there's a lot of wrongs that need to be righted in this country. And we don't get to just kind of be in this space and be like, here we are, we did it all by ourselves, and this is a great place. And without acknowledging the attempted genocide of indigenous folks, the stolen land, and the free labor on the backs of Black bodies. And for me, I carry that in my body and I carry that into every room I'm in, along with the community that I come from. Because we aren't in so many of these spaces and we always have to think about everyone as a whole. Like we're not going into these spaces as individuals. There's stories, there's histories that we're carrying with us. And the social justice work for me is a requirement in any space that I'm in. And this is about making some reparation, some repair. We need to make some restoration and we need to heal. And that, to me, is the core central part of the work and the social justice piece. So in philanthropy, it's meaning returning resources to those because of the theft, the wage theft, the free labor, like all of those things that we just didn't have access to. And so my role in philanthropy is to facilitate the return of the resources and being very clear about that. And to me, that is a just society.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's so beautiful. Now you mentioned philanthropy, and you work for Satterberg Foundation, and you're like the first person in program, right? The first program director at Satterberg. Like, how did that happen? How did that come about?
Yeah, when I came in 5 years ago, I was a program officer, and the Satterberg Foundation has been around about 31 years, but it was family run for the first 23 years, I would say. And then staff just started being hired 8 years ago. So the first staff member has been there 8 years, number 2 and number 3 have been there 7 years, and then I was the 4th person, and I've been there 5 years. So that's still pretty new. And then we were looking at what is the work that I'm really doing outside of a program officer and some of the different things like the Seattle Equity Summit that you participated in, Victoria, and a lot of the other community things that we do, we were trying to find a space for that. So along with programming and then strategic initiatives is where we landed. And So it was a new position that was created, and I applied for it and everything, and was fortunate to be named the director of programs. So it's a pretty cool opportunity to kind of shape what this role looks like.
Yeah. I mean, okay, I do want to talk about the summit because that's just was off the chain. Okay. But I also I want to talk to you. I don't want to get too ahead of myself in all of this conversation, because the other piece is that, through your initiatives and direction, there's an initiative to support Black and Indigenous people. And so I want to hear about both of those things. So let's start with the summit, first of all, because that's right in the programming area. This is the third year that you've been doing it, correct? Mm-hmm. So, but I would love for you to tell us a little bit about what was the impetus of both the previous years, but also of this year.
Yes. So when we originally thought of this had been something I had been working on since probably 2015, actually. Mm-hmm. And I was doing it with some alums from Yale and with some alums that worked in philanthropy. So whether at Gates Foundation or other local foundations, and we were trying to kind of shape the summit. And then every time I'd have a meeting, it was like, oh, and then we could do this. And I was like, no, now that's a different event. That sounds amazing, but that's not what I want to do. So then I would get new partners, and the same thing kept happening over and over. And I remember I was just having the conversation with Sarah, the executive director at Satterberg. And she's like, oh, well, maybe we can partner on it. And I was like, okay, but this is the shape. What I wanted was a space where folks could come together from different sectors and spend a day learning from each other. Because so often, we go to conferences or we go to spaces, and it's like a philanthropy conference, or it's a nonprofit, or it's around specific things. It's like corporate and nonprofit government. It's all these different spaces. So we're all just talking to each other when we really need to talk cross-sector and figure out how we can come up with some of the solutions together. Because so many folks say they want to work on equity and do inclusion and diversity work, but no one's actually talking about it across the board. And that's kind of what we need to do. So the first year, Satterberg came on as a partner, Fred Hutchinson in Seattle, Cancer Research was a partner, and TAP in Seattle was a partner. And we focused on economic security, housing, and education in Seattle, because that was a lot of kind of what was happening at the time. Last year, we focused on BIPOC women and civic engagement. So women running for office, which Seattle in 2020 had a large number of Black women running for office, and that won. So really encouraging that, and just the convening of bringing folks together. And I think people underestimate the power of what we can do when we come together and we share our stories, we share space with one another. It heals, and it just builds something in you and inspires, where folks that went to the first summit are like, I decided to leave my job after the, I don't work there anymore. I changed this, or I'm running for office, or I created a PAC. And this year, we always have had art elements in the summit from the first year. We have spoken word, in the beginning and the end. And every year we infuse it. And this year, after seeing the movements of the uprisings of 2020, we really thought about, we need to center art. Art is important and art is life. And it's not an afterthought. These aren't just after school programs. These are change making. Movement doesn't happen without art. So if you think of, marches and things like that, there are signs, there's recognizable signs from the Women's March. Everyone knows the Muslim women, the African-American young lady, and the Latino woman on these boards that people were carrying around. So, and that's art. Or there's music that comes out of marches and protests. And so it's we have to recognize that art is movement, and art is out here changing hearts and minds and policies in some ways. So we wanted to raise those voices up, amplify them, and have an opportunity to talk about what art means to so many different people. This year, we partnered with Detroit, and we had not partnered with another city before, because Satterberg is based in Seattle, but I live in Detroit. So it was a great way to create a new partnership. But I think the biggest, and we need funders to fund art, because it's like, oh, that's an after school program. I want to fund something with more impact, and it's like, no, art is changing lives. So that's how we ended up on that theme. And I mean, you were there. It was a great choice. It was amazing.
Amazing. I know it was recorded. Is it going to be available?
It is. It'll be available in a couple of weeks, someplace. I'm guessing on our website. I'm not sure.
But it'll get out there.
Yes.
Definitely at least the link in your website at the start of it. That's fantastic. And it's also a way of, uplifting and also advocating, right? That you do a lot of advocacy for the things that you care about, the things that the foundation is supporting. And you're also partnering with a lot of different organizations and foundation. And I do love the cross-sector work. And that's really beautiful. So CC, flowers to you, girl. Flowers to you. The energy was so contagious. It was beautiful. So thank you for that.
It was fun. We danced.
Yes. Oh my God, that dancing at the end. Yes. We showed up. All right. Let's see. Let's take it a little bit in a different direction and now let's talk about the commitment that. Okay, I was going to say the commitment of the funds that Satterberg has made, right, to BIPOC. But before we get there, I kind of remember a story, actually, that you used to work for the family.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh my gosh. And this is so, it's beyond a coincidence. So after being at Satterberg for a while, one of the board members came in with a Kenworth calendar. And I was like, oh my gosh, we used to get these when I worked at Kenworth Trucking, like for the holidays. And then it was then that we made the connection that Satterberg Foundation is connected to Kenworth Trucking and PACCAR. And so for a couple of years, I would always, when I introduced myself, where it was fun fact, I was like, oh, I was a fiberglass specialist and material handler at Kenworth Trucking Company. And I happened to work at a foundation that's returning resources from that wealth. And recently this year, I had a conversation with someone and they were like, wait, pause. This isn't just a fun fact. You just kind of are breezing right past this. This is significant. And let's spend some time here and think about what that looks like. And then I've been thinking about it ever since that conversation. And my father worked at Kenworth as well. So he was there 24 years. And it was his job when he left the service, and he was a mechanic, and we moved from North Carolina back to Seattle. And that was the job that he had for 24 years. And he was laid off. And at 54 years old, and it's like, what is, a Black man with just a high school diploma is supposed to do after that? So we talked through it because I called my father after that conversation and I was like, Daddy, can we talk about like what that experience was like? And he was just like, well, I couldn't access my retirement because I wasn't old enough. I went to truck driving school and I thought, I build trucks, maybe I should drive them. And he's like, I tried that, but I couldn't do it. It's just too rigorous on the body. And he's like, I can't do it. So he didn't make it a year doing that. And then he got a job at Boeing and was able to stay at Boeing for 5 years and retire from there. And by that time, Kenworth were giving people the opportunity to cash out their retirement benefits or just take the monthly disbursement. And he's like, I cashed out. He's like, I know it's less money for the company, but he's like, I'm Black. I ain't gonna live forever anyway. So give me my money now. And then just talking to him about the layoffs he watched, and I was laid off from there too after being there just 2 years. And so thinking about that experience and how he said, he's like, whenever profits dropped, everyone on the plant floor, that's where the layoffs happened, but the layoffs didn't happen upstairs. So he just saw so many people, like families, go through so much turmoil around losing a job, around losing their homes and things like that, because the layoffs were frequent, and they just went right down the list. And then I just was thinking about when I worked there. I worked second shift from like 3 to midnight. And we had to produce 32 trucks a day. So coming in second shift, if there were any issues or anything in the first shift, couldn't do their 16 trucks. Then second shift had to, make up that time. Because at the end of the day, we still need to do 32 trucks. So just thinking about it that intently and going and crossing off truck number 160527, on a certain date, and then tying that back to where I am right now. Like, I don't know how many folks in philanthropy can actually say that they literally, with their bare hands, played a role in building the wealth of these funds. And that, it's like when I remember what it was like to sand, what it was like to cut fiberglass and mix it and repair the hood of a truck. That is so powerful to me, to have that direct link. It's crazy. Like, where does that happen at?
I don't know. I'm getting chills, and I'm almost feeling like tears wanting to come up as you're saying this story, because when we think about the title of this talk, we talked about reparative philanthropy, and then to have you both be contributing, you and your family, and and the reality is that it's many African Americans, right, and indigenous people and other people of color that help to build the wealth of this country, and in this particular of this foundation, right? And now here you are in a position of distributing the wealth back, right? Tell me a little bit more about the initiative that Satterberg launched, and also what your hopes are in terms of.
Last year, like many foundations and many companies, we made a statement, and with that, we made a commitment. The board made a commitment to spend an additional $50 million over the next 10 years to center Black and Indigenous work in all of its forms. And right now, Satterberg for the longest time has always spent above the minimum 5%. Usually more around 10%. And now with this additional $5 million a year, it's going to go, a little higher. Maybe it's capping at 15% this year, or about 12 or 13%. It just depends. But so the work around that, we called this fund the Reparative Action Fund. And some folks were like, well, what about reparations? And I'm like, well, we're a funder, and we don't control all these systems. So reparations, we have to change the systems, and that's not our role right now, but what we can do is move the resources, facilitate the return of these resources. So what we've been doing is we're working with Will Portery, a consultant, and we are just looking at who are the movement builders, the power builders, infrastructure organizers, like who are the folks out there doing that work? And we're doing this in a way like where we're not asking folks to apply for the funding. We are going out and finding the organizations that we know are already doing the work. So oftentimes when I see the funds returning, it's not for like the work that you're gonna do, it's for the work that you've already done, and looking at it as a lens that this is already your money anyway. You should have access to this money, but wanting to do things like not just fund programs or fund organizations, but how can we fund folks to be able to purchase land. Like there's a lot of folks out here trying to purchase healing space for their people, for their community, just land or building for the work that they're doing and the people they're serving. So I see us moving the funds in that way as well. So not just movement building and power building, but thinking about generational wealth and how do we just move it so that we can actually own our own land, since we never got our 40 acres or, the attempted genocide on the stolen land. How do we just get that land back? So thinking about land reclamation, healing, and rest and restoration is a big piece of this as well. So how can we fund sabbaticals? And how can we fund individuals to just take a break, take a nap? Because there's this belief that foundations can't fund individuals, and you actually can. It's something you have to do with an attorney or some form you have to fill out, but you actually can fund individuals. And we need to figure out how to do that, because this is, and this isn't about reporting. Like we shouldn't be doing any reporting as a part of this Reparative Action Fund, besides just how much money did we distribute, because in the spirit of reparations and repair, we're moving the money to you, and that's the end of it. Like, we're not going to force you to be in relationship with us. We're approaching it. Many of the calls we have with folks where we schedule the call and they get on and they're telling us all their programs, and we're like, wait, let me stop you right there. This isn't a call for you to pitch us. Like, we already want to fund you. This is a call for us to pitch ourselves as, do you even want to partner with us? And trying to get over the idea all money's not good money, and maybe our stuff's not together enough for you to even want to receive dollars from us. Like, how are we really showing up? So we have to make sure that we're worthy of you to take these dollars from us. And that's really what the call is about. We want to tell you about what we're doing, what we're thinking, and in hopes that you'll partner with us, and then we'll move forward from that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow, beautiful, amazing work. Have you run into some challenges with other funders around this vision, or?
Definitely. I mean, I would say there's the gaslighting that happens, where I've only been in philanthropy 5 years, and I came into this intentionally because I found that there weren't folks from community in the space. And it was always like, if I was on a grant committee or something, I'm like, why can't we just do this? And it's like, oh, well, you just don't get it. You don't understand like how this works. And then once I finally got in, it's still a lot of those conversations. They're like, well, how do you choose who gets the money? Like, how do you know what's a good grant and what's a bad grant? And I'm like, what do you mean? Tell me what you think a bad grant is. But they're like, how will you know the impact? Like, if you give unrestricted funding, which is what Satterberg does in multi-year funding, they're like, if it's unrestricted, how do you measure the work? I'm like, why do you need to measure the work? Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, how do you know it's working? Why do we need to know it's working? Our job is to facilitate the return of these resources. Who's asking you what you spend your money on? And I think especially now with kind of the rise of this diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation that everyone is having, or everyone wants to do this training. And so now funders are like judging nonprofits. Like, what does your board look like? You don't have enough people of color. You don't have enough people of color on your staff. And then what if nonprofits started asking funders those same questions? Right? Why does your board look all white? Why does your staff look like this? Or, because how are you judging folks on the things that you aren't even doing, and your stuff's not even tight? Mm-hmm. So, and how are you making decisions about what folks should measure when you're not even from that community? You don't know what works and what doesn't work. So so this whole idea that philanthropy has sold us of like, we need an LOI, we need a site visit, we need an application, then we need reports, we need 30-page reports. Like, the report has to equal kind of, if this is $100,000, then we might need a 100,000-page report on the work that you've done. And I'm like, why? Why do you need that? And they're like, well, because that's what you do. It's like, no, you just don't get it. Or when I ask other funders about their spending, when they stay at 5%, I'm like, why don't you spend more? And they're like, well, you just don't get it. I'm like, I get it, and then I have to start asking. I'm like, wait, am I missing something? I thought our job here was to move money and get some impact. But when folks want to hoard the wealth, and because everyone's been conditioned to believe that philanthropy is like this really highbrow, you have to be super smart to do it, and that's what I thought because I couldn't get in for so long. And then I get in, and the folks that I see on the other side of that door, I'm not with the best and brightest. I thought I would be after, with all the challenges it took to get in. I'm like, where's the exceptional people? I thought that's who was going to be here when I got here.
Wow, you're learning so much. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about you, CC, is that you really have like just taking the curtains off, right? And you just like, guys, look behind the curtains. This is
yes.
These are just regular people maintaining institutions,
Yes, just regular people. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah. I think you and Edgar are like right there together. Edgar Villanueva, that's what I mean.
Yes.
But you did mention a couple of things in those stories. One is about the importance of multi-year funding, The importance of multi-year funding, and also asking and releasing more than just 10%, even like 8% or 5%, but releasing more, especially, during this time, people are like, well, we have to save our funds for the rainy day. Well, if we're not having a rainy day now, I don't know what's happening.
We're flooding right now. It's bad out here. It's like we have to move the money now. And I know, we have this $50 million commitment over 10 years, and it's like a minimum of $5 million a year. And I was thinking about it. And as I talked to folks in community and organizers out here doing the work and the things they were able to do during the summer of 2020, they built so much momentum, and we have to keep it up. And when I see like the $5 million additional a year that we can move, I'm like, can we move 10 million this year and 10 million next year? Because that's where it's going to make the difference. Like if we don't pour the capital into these movements right now, then they won't be able to sustain them. Then we can come back later and then put in more money. But they've already had a lot of stopgaps. It's like hurry and stop because of the funding. And you just want to be able to get them enough funding for 5 years or longer so that they can actually just build the infrastructure and do the work. And that's when the real change and movement is going to happen. But we can't just keep, because we feel sad this year because of the murders that constantly happen. So really trying to figure out too with funders and just with everyone, like what's the urgency? Mm-hmm. They've been murdering Black folks for hundreds of years since they kidnapped and brought us over here. And now all of a sudden you want to write a statement on it when George Floyd has been murdered. This has been happening. So now that you're paying attention, I want to build something sustainable and not just because you feel sad on Friday.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been feeling sad for a long time. You're currently sitting on the board, on a couple of boards, philanthropic organizations boards, and you're also moving in a lot of different, spaces around, philanthropy. Are there other foundations out there that you're feeling like are really taking on some of these issues that you really support?
Yes, I would say Group Health Foundation for sure. They have showed up for community, long-term funding, unrestricted funding, multi-year. And there's someone we will always, and like we have a great relationship where they'll reach out to us and introduce us to organizations we may not know of. And then we also, it's reciprocal and we can do the same. Hey, we're funding this org, we want to introduce them to you. So that's been really, really good. I would say the Certain Foundation and Andrus Family Fund has really been doing a lot of change and really believe in social justice, particularly Andrus Family Fund. One second.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, I'm back. Sorry.
No apology. Was that your son or your daughter?
No, grown-ups.
One more time. Everybody,
Yes.
time. I hear you. So you have some colleagues.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. It's very heartwarming to hear the way that you envision the work and money and moving things, because a lot of the stories and the narratives that we've been hearing a lot right now is how these billionaires have accumulated so much money during this time, and people are suffering, and there's just so much need, right? And you think even like within the commitment that Satterberg has made, it still is a very small foundation in relation to some of the others, that just have billions of, in their portfolio. So it's good to see that you have colleagues that are like bonding together and trying to move this work forward. But what do you have any? Let's just take a moment here, and that interruption was perfect, because if we just take a moment and you had access to some people into foundations that are like in the billions of dollars, like what would be your hope?
Oh my gosh. I mean, so many things. And I think the key, like even when I think about not just investing in nonprofits led by Black and Indigenous folks, but small businesses. A lot of the work that we do at Satterberg, so we have a lens, an equity lens that we do our grant making through. And then that lens extends itself to who we hire as consultants, who the vendors we work with. So they tend to be small organizations, women-owned businesses, BIPOC folk, whether it's a photographer or a caterer or an event planner. But we always make sure we're centering community. And the thing that I continue to notice is people have a lot of plans to help entrepreneurs, small business owners, like start their business, but no one really gives them the capital. So, and I think sometimes when we're partnering with these smaller businesses, they can't qualify for a lot of like the PPP loans. They don't have capacity or access to an attorney to complete the applications and all the paperwork needed. They don't have the capital. So if I'm partnering with someone, things within our system move very slow as far as like even just getting an invoice to payment. But for because of the organizations that we choose to partner with, they need to pay their folks. They need to pay their staff. So they can't wait 3 weeks for the invoice and the account, for the process, for the check request process. Mm-hmm. So how do we improve our processes? But what could also kind of take some of that burden off is if we actually invested in small businesses beyond just, we have these ideas to help start all these businesses, but then folks don't give these smaller organizations the capital that they need to succeed beyond. So it's like they're doing a job. And I would love for like folks to fund even just the exploration of new ideas and innovation. We don't fund that enough. And I think, there's venture capitalists that'll fund like folks in the tech world. Like, I have this crazy idea, I want to try it. And then it's like millions of dollars and then it doesn't work. And they're like, oh, maybe I should try this. And then millions of dollars again, right? And then for us, we don't get that kind of capital to even, how do I just go in a corner and think, get 3 friends, and let's just throw out all the crazy ideas and try it and actually have money to eat at the same time? Or am I constantly chasing projects and doing the projects that don't align with me because I need to take care of my staff, my team?
Yeah. It's real. CC, your perspective is so refreshing in the philanthropic world, but there's very few very few women of color, people of color in general in the philanthropic arena. And even in the nonprofit sector, which is where I sit, even like when I look at development, in the development sector, there's very few. Like recently, I was helping an organization interview for a deputy position, and there was a woman of color that came in and had all this experience in development and fundraising. I was like, oh my God, get hire this person, or if you don't, I know a couple of other people that can hire this person. And so how do we increase like assets in the pipeline so that other foundations can have people of color representing, because decisions are being made in these rooms and these boardrooms without the input of someone that actually knows, like you're saying, someone from community. You used to work in the community, used to work for TAF, right? In Seattle, working with youth and education, and then you moved into this role. So you had already, and you did a lot of work in community, so you already had like a sense of the community needs, and that could inform the way you're distributing resources. But what can foundations do to help increase the pipeline?
Hire folks with lived experience. Like, that's the main thing. Like, stop fooling yourself and thinking that philanthropy is this really hard, really real thing with all of these rules, or like it's hard to learn, because so often they're like, and must have, you look at the job descriptions, must have 10 years of experience in philanthropy. And I'm like, my grandmother, I always use the example of my grandmother that used to send the birthday cards to all of the grandkids. And she would send $5, or she would send a Barnes and Noble gift card for like $10. And she would just buy a bunch of them at a time and just send everything out like clockwork. And I remember my kids, being who they are, were like, Gigi, can we just get the $5? Because I don't always want to go to Barnes and Noble. I have enough books. I want to buy candy. And she's like, you know what? Whatever. Everybody just get the $5 now, because I don't need to be going to Barnes and Noble to buy them cards anyway. So then she just sends $5. And I'm like, my grandmother did philanthropy in a way that was like, she listened to her folks, and she's like, oh, y'all want unrestricted funding because the Barnes and Noble was restricted. So let me give you some general operating funds, and it's multi-year. And because you expect it every year on your birthday, you look for that birthday card. And I'm like, come on, people, it's not hard. Or how many of us have, the young family member that went to college, and we all are like, here's $20, or here's some money for your books, or, or something. And then the young person comes home, and they come home at the end and at the holidays, and they say, and then what do you say? You say, how was school? That's a report, right? Like, come on, folks, this is not hard. So at Satterberg, what we've been able to do is hire people. So I was the fourth person hired, and then and the first person of color, but every single hire after that has been a person of color. Because I didn't want to be by myself too long, but we have 9 people on staff right now. And out of that 9, 3 folks are white folks. And it's not just that we have 6 people of color, 6 BIPOC folks, but these are all folks from community. So we also weren't looking for folks that had a background in philanthropy, because coming from communities of color, we all do philanthropy. We all have to pitch in for the niece's rent. We all have to help my aunt buy her meds, or it's just what we do. And we didn't know that white folks were calling this philanthropy. We're like, that's just my cousin. It's just, before there was GoFundMe and all these other things. So philanthropy is not a hard thing to learn, and just hire people. Like, our folks are, someone ran a nonprofit. Someone is an attorney and an artist and an organizer. Someone, but then within that, so these are all really just brilliant folks that come from a community and from families that have poured into them. So they know what it is like that to give back. It's just in them to do. So they don't look at it as, they're not coming into it with a charity mindset, in the way that philanthropy has operated for all its time.
I love that. And I'm glad you brought in the piece of like not coming from a charity mindset, because what philanthropy is being asked right now, the philanthropic sector, is to move away from doing charity or being a savior. It's really, releasing the funds and trusting that the community know what their needs are and can utilize the resources accordingly. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned something in the story about the way distributing money out. It's almost like having it, and you used this phrase before about the community check.
Yes.
Could you just dive a little bit deeper into that? Like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when I think about how Black, Indigenous, and people of color have a harder time getting ahead is because we're not like just saving our funds. And Edgar, who you mentioned earlier, Edgar Villanueva, talks about the community check and decolonizing wealth, where it's like if one of us, in the family has a job, I look at like some of my colleagues in foundations, and oftentimes it may be white folks, and they're like maxing out their 401ks. And I'm like, okay, I got to pay this person's rent. I have this person's rent, and then this person's kids' tuition here. And I remember me and my boss, Sarah, still talk about this to this day, but there was this one time our checks were late. And she's like, you'll never let me forget that. But I called and I texted her and I was like, hey, my check's not in my account. And she was like, oh man, let me find out what happened. And I was just like, 3 people need their rent paid. Like this isn't just me, and she's like, I know, because I heard from the other Black person on staff. So it was like, we both were like, uh-oh, I need the money. Where's the money? But this idea of like, that we're not individuals. We didn't get here by ourselves, and whatever family and community needs, we're going to do it. And I think some of us have to build some healthy boundaries around that. You can't give away everything. Yeah. And I think, but because so many of us come from maybe some, just poverty in many cases. So we're not, there is a piece where, of course, we don't want to go back there. But I kind of think, I lived in homeless shelters as a kid, and they're probably, maybe they're really nice now. I mean, maybe there's been some changes, and, and people have to remind me, yeah, you may have lived in homeless shelters, but your children haven't. So you need to stop giving all of your money away.
You're going to go back there.
Exactly. And it's a cycle. So when people think like, how come y'all just can't get ahead? Everyone else is able to do it, because we're taking care of everyone. Mm-hmm. We're taking care of each other. It's our way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, CC. And just so you know, you're not alone. Like I also lived in a homeless shelter, especially after my mother's death. So it's tough. It's tough, and we have, we have to take care. We have to take care of community, and it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense for me to hoard like a couple of $1 million and have my nieces and my nephews like struggling and trying to figure out how to pay their student loan and, and be shackled by student loans, right? Because the more I'm talking, I recently had a conversation with a really amazing, beautiful young woman who offers a lot in the community, and she's saddled by $80,000 in student loans, and she's just like, Victoria, I can't even like give the gift that I feel inside myself to give, because I'm shackled by this debt.
Yeah, the student loans. I've done forbearances and deferment so much that. Because I keep thinking someone's going to save us. So I got to use them. I need that money. I can't afford to, pay these off right now. If I just keep pushing it off, and the interest is going up. And, and I think they start back in September. And I'm already grieving that money that somehow they always find too, no matter what bank I move to or whatever, the money just leaves out of my account. I'm like, hey.
Yeah, they have a sophisticated system, but
really sophisticated.
But here we are in 2021. And let me see, let me just look at the time here. Oh my gosh, we only have 5 minutes. Just give me 1 minute, because I was going to jump into another piece, and that is around, like, Satterberg also funds like work around environment issues, right? And so that's really, and so the intersection of Black and Indigenous folks and also the environmental issue is really critical to look at. And so, when you think about all of your portfolio for funding, and you're looking about the land back, let's go back. Let's go there for a moment to the land.
Yes, land is so powerful. It is so powerful, and it's been used. That is how wealth has been built, and what we have access to and what we don't. So when I like the sustainable environment piece in Satterberg, like, I think in the earlier days, it was really around land conservation, like partnering with land trusts. How do we make sure we purchase this land and protect it? But now we're thinking about it more broadly and thinking about the environmental movement, environmental justice. Like, we shouldn't be doing environmental work that's not connected to social justice. It should overlap. So it's not about just purchasing land to protect it and save it, but also within that, thinking about the environment. How do we purchase land so that people can thrive and have their own land? Businesses, small nonprofits can have their own land, can have their own building. How do we invest into organizations that are doing work around anti-displacement for many of the communities experiencing gentrification now? I think for some folks, when we say this is our environmental work, like the environmental violence that happens to communities when we're displaced, because you can't talk about environmental justice without addressing the displacement. Because oftentimes people say, like, you should catch the bus to work. You should ride your bike to work, because you're polluting the air when you drive. But when I was displaced and I had to move 33 miles outside of the city, away from where my job is, I can't catch the bus to work. So that's for certain folks that can walk and ride their bike to work. I'm not able to do that. So you can't not talk about gentrification and displacement without talking about the implications on the environment. And also it's like environmental work has been led historically by white-led organizations. And the truth is, for many communities of color, because we're super tight on pinching pennies and conservation, like, I will say, like, my grandmother, my mother are some of the most conserving energy people I know. Like, I can't remember how many times we can't run in and out of the house because you can't let the good air out or the cold air out. How often you better turn the light off when you leave the room. You recycle every single piece of foil. You wash it off, and the foil is in the dish rack like it's a plate, dry enough to be reused. So it's like, we don't need any lessons in like recycling or conserving energy, because we don't get to take long showers and things like that. It's just the way it's set up. But we do have to talk about the role that displacement is playing on the environment, and you can't separate those two. So I'm hoping that with our environmental work going forward, and we're going to start having some conversations and trainings in that area with staff and the board to do together, to really think more broadly beyond conserving, partnering with land trusts to conserve land. How do we return land so that folks can reclaim it? Like, that's the real shift and the real change.
Wow. Thank you so much, CC. Thank you so much for sharing that. This land right now is, I know that you moved from, you were in Seattle, right? And in South Seattle, where most of the people of color live and the Black people live, this Superfund site, like in South Seattle and further in those areas. And so there's also the physical illnesses that come from all of that, and right. And then you move to Detroit, and and Detroit has its own issues with a lot of the companies, those automakers that have left. And then everything went into decay, and and also there's a lot of areas that are also polluted. But Detroit, thankfully, is having a resurgence, right? And that the art is really part of that resurgence. But you're in Detroit. Just tell us a little bit, just before we turn it over to the audience. Tell us a little bit about Detroit for you. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Detroit, I would say, has not only saved my life, but my family's, like, really. Seattle had become so heavy on our spirit. Like, I mean, my son, I had a teenage son, he was 15, and just sad to go to school every day because of what he was experiencing. As maybe he was the only Black boy in his class in 10th grade, and had been at the school since 5th grade, the only Black boy, until we moved to Detroit in 10th grade. And I would say, well, do you want to change schools? And he's like, where? Anywhere I go in Seattle, okay, maybe there'll be 4 Black people in my class. But the city had changed so much with the gentrification that Black folks were really displaced and not in the city anymore. So it was like moving schools for him. He's like, I'd rather stay here. I have a lot of support from the administration, but I just have to deal with not seeing people that look like me. And they had kind of resigned themselves to that. And it was just, I mean, and I knew how I felt as an adult. But as a kid growing up in Seattle in the same neighborhood that my kids lived in, I always had kids that looked like me. I had grownups that looked like me in the community. So at first my son, he's sad or maybe he's crying. And I'm like, boy, please, I deal with that all the time at work. And he's like, but you're an adult. You're an adult. You didn't have that when you were a kid. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you're absolutely right. So I made one visit to Detroit in 2012, and it was like abandoned, dark. We stayed downtown, and it wasn't pretty, honestly, but stopping and having conversations with people, like on the street or in every store. And that city, the energy is so vibrant and contagious. I was like, there's something magical about this city, and people don't know about it. It's like the secret. And even just having conversations with Detroiters, I was like, do y'all know what they're saying about you? And they were like, what are they saying? Detroit, we moved there 3 years ago, and because we just could not afford to stay in Seattle. And we were in a situation where, okay, we could sell our house in Seattle and make a profit, but we still have to find a place to live. So we still couldn't afford, even with the profit, to buy something else in the city. So Detroit has allowed us to just live a good life, like to be in an area where I can see Black folks all day. And the other thing I didn't bargain for or think of is that what it would be like for not just me, but for my kids to be around white folks that are used to seeing Black people all day. It is like the energy in my body, the heat in my body changes. When in Seattle, I'm carrying everything, being in philanthropy, I'm walking into a room and folks are like, oh. And then we're sitting down and they're like, hey, I'm like, can we start the meeting? They're like, well, as soon as everyone gets here. I'm like, it's me. They're like, no, but yeah, like where's the important person or the, and I remember I would open the door in Seattle to solicitors and they're like, oh, they're like, hi, are the owners home? I'm like, and I live in the city in Seattle. So Detroit, the same thing. And we have a larger home there because it's Detroit, it's beautiful brick homes. And I open the door and the guy is like, hi, we do masonry work and we've done a couple of houses on your street. And I'm like, you sure you want to talk to me? And he's like, it's your house, right? So I'm like, it is my house, but it's like that whole, it's taken just a weight off of us where we get to just be out in the world and be ourselves. So the culture, the people are beautiful. The city is like one of the most beautiful cities. Like people are like, I can't be in Detroit. I don't want to be landlocked. I'm like, landlocked? I have water right outside my house. There's a huge river. I can see Canada. I mean, it is a beautiful city, and it's a huge city too. I'm getting used to that geographic spread, but Detroit is, when people say, why'd you move here? Are you from here? I'm like, no, we didn't know anyone. We just were like, why not? Why not? We got to take some chances. And now I am able to pay my mortgage, to pay other family members' rent. I can buy gas and food in the same month, Victoria. Like, I don't have to, like, I'll pay half of this bill now, half of this. I mean, we can thrive and be in a beautiful place and feel like we're a part of something that's bigger than us. And respecting the history that this city has played in the making of this country, like from the Underground Railroad, it was the last stop before enslaved people crossed into Canada. Canada's right across the bridge. You can see it. And, and then the Great Migration, or building a Black middle class where you could work someplace for 30 years and put your kids through college and buy a home. Innovation of cars, like all of that is Detroit. So to see the richness of this city, of this state, and everything that it's built for this country, and then for the country to just say, we're done with you. We're not going to save you. But people want to swoop in and like buy the art from the museum. They're like, why is this in Detroit? This doesn't need to be in Detroit. They don't need this. It's just, so it's like, respect the city. You have to respect Detroit, because after everything that they've been through, the resilience and the strength and just the swag of the city gives me energy all day long.
I can feel the love coming through. you know what you just said right now, you're going to have a whole bunch of folks wanting to move to Detroit.
Wait a minute, guys. I don't want it to become Seattle.
I'm definitely coming to visit, though, so you know.
You have to.
But okay, let's go ahead and open it up and turn it over to see if we have some questions. Let's see, the first one is from Deb Cohen, and it's any advice on how to engage people with financial discomfort, but who aren't super wealthy, have family foundation, etc., in conversations about wealth redistribution as a necessary component of healing white supremacy culture?
Whoa, that's a great question. I know, Victoria, you have some ideas on this. I mean, I think some of the first steps, like if folks it's the charity mindset, remove yourself from it. And how is there someone a Black or Indigenous person that you can just give some money to? Like literally Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, whatever, right? And just be like, you know what, here's $2,500. And it's not about, what will they use it on? Will they pay their rent? Will they buy food? Get that out of your mind, and that discomfort, and no one's asked for it. So you don't have an ask, and there isn't any immediate need that you need to know of to make you feel good about giving money. So it's not about you feeling good. You just do it, and no one knows about it. Mm-hmm. That's the test.
Mm-hmm. I agree with all of that. And I would add that, we were in an experiment with a group of white women with resources, and they decided that they actually were in a process of, and they're still in this process of learning about white supremacy culture and how that has impacted people of color, but also how that impacted them as well. and in the way that it formed the culture, right? And so within that, they decided to allocate a certain amount of funds. And rather than them deciding how they were going to allocate the funds, they had the Black body women decide how those funds were going to be allocated. And it's been a journey. It's been a year, we're in 3 years now.
3 years. Mm-hmm.
3 years process. But in the first year when it happened, I could visibly see the white women changing and releasing some of the tension around the money and actually healing themselves. Because the thing about hoarding wealth is that there's all these narratives, all these stories that get told about how you're supposed to be. And in some ways, it actually paralyzes the individual. And so these women have been having to look at not only the relationship of themselves in relationship to money, but also the relationship in their family, the relationship with their husband. How does patriarchy comes into this? It's been a super just transformative experience. So it takes individual to commit to self-learning. And to continue to release and let go. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. And there's a question. Okay. It might be perceived as insulting. Is there a way to give that will be received in this generous spirit? Like what Victoria is talking about also is, we, for the Black women in this process, we had to try to figure out what it was like to receive, because that just doesn't happen. And there's a lesson in that as well, and some learning and building our own capacity around receiving. But the way, because I've done it, if I get a raise at work or some money I wasn't expecting, I pass it on immediately. And the way I frame it is, I've been giving a blessing and I'm sharing it. That's it, and I think, and in this case, this is like a form of reparations, of reparative action, where it's like, what have I done? It's because of the systems in place that some people are able to amass different forms of wealth and other people are not. So treating it as like, because that's the thing, right? It's not a gift. It's not a gift. It's a return. So it is like, it has to be in the spirit of, it is my pleasure to return these resources to you. Right. It's not, this isn't a grant. This isn't a gift. This isn't because of something you did for me. It's not because of any of that. It's because of the history of this country. And it's my responsibility in a way to return the resources to you as an individual. This is a small scale, but I have to start somewhere and see how that builds within your body. And because there's so many changes, I think, happening just from the act of returning, whatever amount it is.
Yeah, and there's I think Lynn Twist and Orlin Bishop both do a lot of work, have done a lot of work around the energy of money. And so those two, I think I will recommend that people either like look them up on YouTube or get their books and learn a little bit more about, because definitely money has a lot of energy, a lot of baggage. There's a question here about why is Canada significant for you? Racism and misogyny and white supremacy are alive and well here. Genocide of the indigenous people happening here. So I think this question comes from when you were saying that you could see Canada from Detroit. I don't.
Oh, Canada isn't significant to me. I'm saying Canada as in. For enslaved people, that was where you cross the line to be free, to liberation, and not be owned any longer by a body. So that to me is what's significant about Detroit's proximity to Canada and the role that it played in the history of the country. Oh, Canada. Oh, please. Yeah, Canada doesn't get any passes. Not in any way. This was it's a geography proximity thing that I'm trying to, people know that like Michigan is close to Canada, but they don't know until they're actually in Detroit. And then we go to dinner across the border, and we have dinner in Windsor, Canada, and go home. And it's only 15 minutes from my house. So that's what I was trying to share. So thanks for the clarifying question.
Okay, and here's another one. It says, also, can you share info about Black Ivy Manor? Can BIPOC artists apply directly? Thank you.
Yes, so Black Ivy Manor is something we've been working on for a while, and it's actually my home, and we host folks to come and spend their time there. So as soon as I move out my adult child, it is open. But really, we want it to be a space. And we've hosted a lot of folks there over the 3 years we've been in Detroit. But we see it as a way to get people to come to the city. We just put people up, spend some time there, and share your art. Are you an author? Are you an artist? Do you want to share some works? And we invite people over and just do things kind of old school. Like during the Harlem Renaissance, where artists were invited over into people's homes, and we actually talk about like the art, and we share it, and then make sure, and then how do we get folks what they need to be able to do the work and explore their work without having to rely on, getting certain fellowships and grants and things like that to sustain themselves.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, CC. I think that's all the questions we have. What would you like to share? What question do you have, or like what statement do you have that I didn't get to tap into? Is there something you'd like to share?
Well, we talked about a lot. I mean, I think, for me, this has just been a really great conversation and a great opportunity to reflect. And I think, and I love the questions and just like around the clarity of things too, because so thank you so much for asking that question about Canada, because I would not want to leave people with the impression that I have family that lives in Canada, and my brother-in-law was the commissioner of the Canadian Football League, and he is a Black man from Queens, New York, and it was a difficult job for him. When people say, oh, there's no racism in Canada, and until that Black guy became the commissioner, they were like, what's going on? And all the hate mail and everything that he received. So yeah, we're under no illusions there. So I appreciated that question, because I would not want to leave with folks having that impression. But I think, I don't know, Victoria, is there anything else you want to touch on?
Okay, this is close it out with this one. I'm going to go a little heavy here on you. What brings you despair? Oh
my gosh. You know what this is going to sound really, I don't know. What brings me despair is happiness.
Happiness?
Happiness, because it's temporary. I think as a Black woman, trying to find our joy and exist in it is the scariest thing, because I do fear that the moment that I feel immense joy, something's going to happen. And there's nothing more anxious in my body around when something really cool or really big is happening for me. That's when I feel like I'm going to die, because good things don't happen for us. So often things are snatched from up under us. The other shoe is going to drop. Will I live to see it? Because that is, so happiness for me is terrifying. If I feel happy for too long, I'm like, uh-oh, I better cut that out, because if I have too much joy in my heart, it's going to be snatched away. I'm going to have to deal with the tragedy.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. I someone posted saying that you're not alone, and it's true. I feel that sometimes as well, especially during this past 2 years, that it's just everything has been so intense and so heightened. that you just don't know when something's going to strike. Okay, then, and the other coin of that is what brings you hope?
Young people.
Now, I'm not talking about the foo-foo hope. I'm talking about the hope.
Young people. Every time I'm in a room with young people, their energy, and when I hear them talk about the changes they want to see and what they want to do, like this generation is just so different. Like I think we were, radical and brazen, but these kids, I feel like we're going to be okay. Some days I'm not sure with the TikTok and I'm like, oh, this is who's going to be running stuff. But then, when I have conversations I have 3 kids, they're 29, 19, and 14. And when I have conversations with them, I'm like, we might be okay. They might, the kids in their generation might take care of us. But anytime I'm in a room, I get to be on a call with young folks, like the Equity Summit, we had young folks from Creative Justice, and I was just like, yep, we about to be good because they got us. Mm-hmm. So anytime I can be in there and just get some of that energy from them, I feel inspired. And it's the adults where I'm like, oh, damn, we're screwed. And then the kids, I'm like, oh, I can take a breath. I'll be able to retire, and I can pass the baton, pass the mic. We'll be okay, I hope.
We will. We'll be okay. We'll be okay. I see the way you raise your children, and not only that, the way you also mentor, like the young staff person at Satterberg, like Julie, and I see how you lift her up. And, I just want to thank you so much, CC, for everything that you're doing. And I want to tell you that what brings me hope is to have people like you and to have doing the work and be out there speaking truth to power. Thank you so much for this conversation. And I wish you well, my sister. And please, please rest up because you definitely put out a lot this past week.
Thank you so much for having me, Victoria. This has been just a lot of fun. I love talking to you. Thank you.
Bye. Take good care.
Bye, you too. Thank you.
Bye.
Ladies, thank you so much for being with us today. It was a wonderful conversation, and the first conversation in our Money as Medicine series. The topic of reparative philanthropy is so important, and it's so hopeful. So thanks for all you both are doing to help us understand these issues and to move in the direction of decolonizing philanthropy and reparative philanthropy. It's wonderful. Again, we'll have the recordings in our media outlets in a week or two, and we hope you'll take a look at our website and join us for our next event next Friday or in the future. Victoria Santos and Andrus Gardner Gleser, thank you for being with us at the New School at Commonweal. See you next time, everybody.